The humid air hung thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket woven with the scent of decaying leaves and the distant screech of unseen creatures. Sergeant Major Kaito Ishikawa wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere. Really, Kaito was dead. Or rather, undead. A specter of vengeance, fueled by the burning injustice of his betrayal and the massacre of his squad in the godforsaken jungles of Burma. He drifted, tethered to this earthly plane by a burning desire to make those responsible pay. He could still feel the phantom ache of the bullet that had ripped through his chest, the cold, sticky feel of his own blood. But more than the physical pain, he felt the gnawing emptiness of unfinished business. His mission, their mission, had been compromised. They'd walked into an ambush, a perfectly orchestrated slaughter, orchestrated by someone they'd trusted. Major General Thorne, a man Kaito had sworn to protect. He found himself drawn, inexplicably, towards a hidden valley. The jungle here was ancient. The trees gnarled and overgrown, their roots snaking across the ground like grasping claws. The valley opened into a clearing, revealing a temple, swallowed by the jungle but undeniably there. Its stone facade, etched with intricate carvings depicting forgotten gods and mythical creatures, hinted at a history long predating the conflict that now ravaged the land. This was the Temple of the Silent Guardians. A place whispered about in hushed tones by the locals, a place said to be forbidden to outsiders. Kaito felt a pull towards it, a magnetic force drawing him deeper into the valley. He wasn't alone. It was Thorne. Thorne wasn't just a traitor. He was something more. Kaito had witnessed a ritual the night of the ambush, a dark ceremony involving chanting, blood, and an artifact Thorne had been searching for in these jungles for years. The Serpent's Eye. A relic said to grant unimaginable power. He knew Thorne intended to use the eye to further his ambitions, to seize control and reshape the world in his twisted image. Kaito phased through the crumbling temple entrance, the air inside thick with the smell of incense and decay. He could hear Thorne's voice, a low, guttural murmur, emanating from the heart of the temple. He pressed on, navigating the maze of corridors, past crumbling statues and ancient murals depicting scenes of sacrifice and conquest. The air grew heavier, the shadows deeper, as he approached the central chamber. Here, Thorne stood before an altar, bathed in the eerie glow of the Serpent's Eye. The artifact, a polished obsidian stone carved in the shape of a serpent's head, pulsed with a dark energy that made Kaito's spectral form flicker and waver. They were armed to the teeth, their eyes scanning the shadows, wary of any threat. They couldn't see Kaito, of course. He was a ghost, invisible to the living. But he could feel their fear, their unease. They were pawns in Thorne's game, oblivious to the true extent of his ambition and the darkness that consumed him. "You're meddling where you don't belong, Ishikawa," Thorne's voice boomed, echoing through the chamber. He hadn't turned around. How could he know Kaito was there? Kaito's spectral form solidified, becoming more visible, more tangible. "You betrayed us, Thorne. You murdered my men. You will pay for your sins." Thorne finally turned, his face contorted with rage. "You should have stayed dead, Ishikawa, but you always were a stubborn fool, still clinging to your misplaced sense of honor." He gestured to his men. "Kill him!" The soldiers opened fire, their bullets ripping through the air but passing harmlessly through Kaito's spectral form. He was beyond their weapons, beyond their understanding. He was a ghost, a phantom, a vengeful spirit. He disarmed them, disabled them, leaving them groaning on the floor, too terrified to move. Thorne watched, his eyes narrowed, a flicker of fear in their depths. He knew he couldn't defeat Kaito with brute force. He had to use the Serpent's Eye. He raised the artifact, its dark energy intensifying, and chanted in a language Kaito didn't understand, a language of power and corruption. The temple began to tremble, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The air crackled with energy, the shadows deepening, twisting into grotesque shapes. He had to stop Thorne, but how? He was a ghost, powerless against the artifact's dark magic. He needed something, anything, to even the odds. He looked around the chamber, his eyes scanning the ancient murals, the crumbling statues, the forgotten relics. Then he saw it, a small, unassuming stone tablet, hidden behind a statue of a forgotten deity. He reached for it, his spectral hand passing through the statue, grasping the tablet. It was cold, smooth, and radiated a faint, almost imperceptible energy. They were symbols, ancient symbols of protection, of warding, of banishment. He didn't understand the symbols, but he felt a connection to them, a sense of familiarity. He focused his will, his energy, channeling it into the tablet, willing it to protect him, to empower him. The tablet began to glow, the symbols radiating a brilliant light. The light washed over Kaito, strengthening his spectral form, pushing back the serpent's eye's dark energy. He felt a surge of power, a renewed sense of purpose. He charged towards Thorn, his hand outstretched, the glowing tablet held aloft. Thorn screamed, his face contorted with terror as Kaito slammed the tablet into the serpent's eye. The artifact shattered, its dark energy dissipating in a blinding flash of light. The temple stopped shaking, the shadows receded, and the air cleared. Thorn collapsed to the ground, his body convulsing, his eyes wide with fear. The serpent's eye's dark energy had backfired, consuming him from the inside out. He was no longer a powerful, ambitious general. He was a broken, defeated man. He had achieved his vengeance, but he felt no satisfaction, only a profound sense of sadness. He had killed Thorn, but he couldn't bring back his men. He had stopped the serpent's eye from falling into the wrong hands, but he couldn't undo the damage it had already caused. "Why, Thorn?" Kaito asked, his voice a whisper, barely audible in the silence of the temple. "Why did you betray us?" Thorn looked up at him, his eyes filled with regret. "Power, Ishikawa. It's a seductive mistress. I wanted to control the world, to shape it in my image." "And what did it cost you?" Kaito asked. "Everything." Thorn closed his eyes, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He took a deep breath and then fell silent, his body still. He was dead. Kaito looked around the temple, at the crumbling walls, the ancient murals, the forgotten relics. He had fulfilled his purpose, achieved his vengeance, but he was still tethered to this world, still bound by his unfinished business. He knew he couldn't move on until he had ensured that the serpent's eye's influence was eradicated, that its dark energy was contained. He found hidden caches of weapons, secret laboratories, and underground bunkers, all connected to Thorn's network. He destroyed them all, one by one, cleansing the land of its corruption. Finally, he came to a small, secluded cave, hidden deep within the jungle. Inside, he found a group of monks, the silent guardians, the protectors of the temple. They had been watching him, guiding him, helping him to fulfill his destiny. "You have done well, Sergeant Major Ishikawa," the head monk said, his voice calm and serene. "But I'm still a ghost," Kaito said. "I'm still tethered to this world." "Your purpose is fulfilled," the monk said. "You are free to move on." Kaito looked at the monk, at the ancient temple, at the lush jungle. He had found peace, not in vengeance, but in service, in protecting others from the darkness that had consumed Thorn. He smiled, a genuine smile, the first he had felt since his death. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then faded away, his spectral form dissolving into the humid air. The jungle was silent, the temple still, the silent guardians watching over the land, waiting for the next threat, the next guardian to rise. Years later, the story of Sergeant Major Kaito Ishikawa became a legend whispered among the soldiers who served in those jungles, a legend of a vengeful ghost who protected them from evil, a guardian spirit who watched over them from beyond the grave. And sometimes, when the air was thick with humidity and the shadows were deep, they could almost feel his presence, a reassuring whisper in the wind, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope, there is always a chance for redemption.